Hello everyone, so today I am going to be talking all about the Pam and Tommy series on Hulu and Disney Plus. This is such an interesting series and I have done a lot of research into this. I'm a big Pamela fan. There's a lot to say about this series and unpack. So I am going to be dishing all the details on the subject matter, the story, the problematic controversy of the story being told, what the real Pamelaanderson and Tommy Lee think about the series, what was actually true and what wasn't. I'm going to be looking into some of the scenes as well and the dialogue. In this part one, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the heavy stuff because a lot needs to be said. But in part two, I'm going to be going a little bit more into the creativity and the aesthetics of the show, including a lot of details about the transformations, insider information about the makeup, hair, clothes, where some of the costumes were sourced. Oh my goodness, some of the costumes were absolutely insane. And a heads up, there will be spoilers. So as you can tell, I am extremely enthusiastic about this show. However, I am very torn because of the fact that Pamelaanderson didn't actually approve this story being told. And I'm going to be going a lot more into that in a minute. So the series is obviously about Pamela and Tommy's sex tape being stolen and leaked and how it went viral on the internet. It was the first viral video to ever be spread worldwide on the internet, and the show really goes into how it affected them, what they went through, and how it ultimately affected their lives and the relationship. So the show is 8 episodes. It spans over the period of about 2.5 years from the beginning of their relationship to the end, and everything that happened in between with the whole mess of this awful thing that happened to them. I also want to make a disclaimer that I'm going to be using the phrase sex tape, even though I don't personally believe that it is a sex tape. I think it was a home video in which they filmed an intimate moment and it got called a sex tape. So in order to remain consistent, I'm going to refer to it as a sex tape, but I don't believe that it actually is. First and foremost, I need to acknowledge and express that it can't be very nice to have a series made about a very traumatic time in your life, especially when you are still alive, living your life. Movies and series about real stories are often about people in history or people that have since passed away. Pamela and Tommy are still very much alive, living their lives, so the fact that this series was made could potentially bring up old wounds for them that they just might not want. It also now puts a lot of focus on the sex tape again. I can imagine that a lot of people are now going to go and watch it again, so it's bringing more eyes to the tape itself, unfortunately. So I want to be respectful of the fact that the voice that's represented in this show is not the real Pamela's voice. But on the other side of things, I do think it's a really important story to be told. If you're looking on the positive side, it's a good thing that the true story has finally been told, because a lot of people for many years believed that they leaked it on purpose just for financial gain and for their careers, which was absolutely untrue. I think the show also did a really good job at showing how women are viewed in these types of circumstances, and it also showed a lot of how Pamela was mistreated by so many people, by the media, the entertainment industry, the lawyers, the public, everyone that was involved in leaking the video. It was really unfair and detrimental on her and Tommy as well, but we'll get more into that. Although this show is the true story because it contains the facts about how it was stolen, it does not represent the true actual story of what Pamela and Tommy actually went through behind closed doors. The people that made the show know that, the actors that played Pam and Tommy know that, and it's something we should just all keep in mind, that just because we've seen a show about what these people went through doesn't mean that we know what they actually went through. Got it? Good. Okay. Now it's quite clear watching through the series that it really is on Pamela's side. It portrays her in a good light, I think, for the most part. Members of the production have even said that they have really tried to take care of this character. of Pamela. I also really do like the writing. I think that the writing is on Pamela's side as well. I like that it has a lot of really strong female voices in the show. It has some great female characters. I do think that the show is trying to obviously speak up for Pamela. However, I found a really interesting quote by Adrian Horton, who wrote an article on it, saying, "No amount of impersonation or sympathetic portrayals in which Pam clearly recognizes the bias against her can get me past the fact that a show about consent exists without the consent of one of its central subjects." The irony of this show, I don't know how to feel about it. Was it right that this show was made? Probably not if I'm thinking about it from Pamela's point of view. But on the other side of things, I think it's a really important story. I'm going to be talking a bit more about some people that have spoken on behalf of Pamela later on. Now, obviously, they reached out to Pamela to let her know they were making this show. They wanted her involvement in the show, obviously just for accuracy and just as some kind of acceptance. She did not respond. I'm not surprised, to be honest. They contacted her multiple times throughout the creating of this show. She did not respond at all. Part of me thinks surely it should not be allowed to make a show about someone's life. I guess there are certain laws under like Creative Commons. However, they didn't need Pamela's approval legally to make the show, so they still went on with the show. I'm sure they would have preferred her approval of it, but didn't get it. So how did they get this story? The show is actually adapted from a 2014 Rolling Stone article by Amanda Chicago Lewis, where she actually tracked down Rand Gauthier, who is the man who stole the tape and leaked it, and she had an extensive interview with him in which he shared exactly what happened, how he broke in and stole it, why he did it, why he wanted to get revenge, and exactly how he ended up leaking the tape. So that is how they got the story, and because the story is now deemed public, that is why they are legally allowed to make it without Pamela and Tommy's actual consent. Some of the facts in the show were actually really surprising. So what was true? Rand Gauthier really was an electrician working in Tommy Lee and Pamela's mansion with a team of electricians, and he and the team were fired without pay. That really did happen. He really did go back to collect his tools, and Tommy Lee really did wave a shotgun in his face, made him leave without giving his tools back. I thought that this was added in for dramatic effect. I thought, oh my god, they are making Tommy Lee look like an absolute arsehole, but this actually did happen. He really did actually plan out that he was gonna go in there and steal the safe, and this I cannot believe, but he actually did wear a rug on his back when he sneaked into the mansion to look like their fluffy dog. I can't believe this is true. I really thought they just added this in as like a comedic thing, but it really did happen. And I guess like the security cameras at the time, it was the 90s, they were really bad quality, so I guess that's how he pulled it off. And he really did have a background in porn along with his wife Erica. In the series, she is now in a same-sex relationship. I'm not sure if that is true or if that was added in. I imagine it might have been. I didn't find any information on that, but she and him were in the porn industry in the past. And then there's this character called Butchie Pereno, who was also real apparently. He's this kind of like mafia gangster kind of guy who Rand goes to borrow money from, basically, in order to get the tape distributed. So what does Pamela think about the show? Well, we don't actually know. So it came out in February, which was a couple of months ago, and she has not yet publicly spoken about how she feels about it. So since I filmed this video, there has been a recent interview with Pamela on The View talking about her new role as Roxy in Chicago on Broadway and her documentary series coming out soon on Netflix, which I'm super excited to watch. And in the interview, she kind of hints at what she thinks of Pam and Tommy.
What are you most excited to share about your story? Well, sharing my story, first of all.
Yeah.
I'm writing my own book, not with a collaborator or anything.
You'll notice that in any recent interviews, the subject of Pam and Tommy has not ever been brought up. This is most likely because her PR team have instructed that the topic is not brought up in any interview questions. It's not uncommon for PR teams to have a list of no-go topics when celebrities are booked for interviews, so it's quite clear that Pamela does not want to be asked about the show or share her opinion publicly. Otherwise, this would definitely have already been asked by now. However, some people have spoken up for her. So Courtney Love, who is a friend of Pamela, posted a very angry post on Facebook regarding the show. It's since been taken down and I couldn't find the whole post, but I found little bits of it. She called the show fucking outrageous, a piece of shit. She says, "My heart goes out to Pammy and shame on Lily James, whoever the fuck she is. Hashtag vile." I immediately felt really bad for Lily James after reading this. I have to admit, I haven't actually seen any Lily James films or TV. I know that she's in a whole bunch of things. Yeah, that must have stung a bit, and I know that Lily James also reached out to Pamela to try and get her approval or to just try and communicate with her, because obviously she's going to be playing her, but at the end of the day, Lily James is an actress. She's doing a job, and she also expressed that, you know, she was terrified to play this role. It was like, I think she said that like a week before she almost pulled out because she was so frightened to play this role. And she and Sebastian Stan, who played Tommy, both say that these were the hardest roles that they've ever had to play. So I did feel really bad for Lily James that she's being targeted when this show was not her idea. She was employed to play the part of Pamela. So I don't think anyone should come for Lily. What also made me feel really bad for her was that in a lot of interviews when they're talking about it, you can see the disappointment on Lily's face whenever she talks about how she tried to reach out to Pamela. Clearly this meant a lot to her and she really wanted to do it justice. She really wanted to look after Pamela as the character in the show. To not hear back from the person you're playing and knowing that they potentially, you don't know what they think of you, I can't imagine how awkward it must have been for her. On the other hand, Sebastian Stan did hear back from Tommy, and Tommy was actually pretty cool with it. I saw an interview where he honestly seems like he just brushes it off. He's like, yeah, it's pretty cool, it's a beautiful story, and he did communicate with Sebastian quite a lot regarding the role. So yeah, they did have correspondence on how he was going to play Tommy. I just feel so awkward for Lily because I am an actor as well, of no scale in comparison, but I can imagine how hard that must have been. Also, the fact that so many people didn't think that she and Sebastian were going to pull it off, but I'm going to speak more about that in part 2. Another source close to Anderson, so this is another friend of Pamela Anderson, told EW, they said, "I do know she'll never watch this. Not even years from now, not even the trailer." So as far as we can tell, it seems that Pamela is not going to be watching this. It's pretty obvious from the fact that she's not responded and from what her friends have said that she does not like the fact that this show's been made, and so we should remain respectful of that. But at the same time, she hasn't said anything about it, so we can't assume that, you know, she thinks Lily James is trash or whatever. Like, a lot of people are saying that, oh, Pamela doesn't like Lily and whatever, but she hasn't even spoken on it, so we can't make assumptions about what she thinks of the performance of the show, etc. I also wanted to talk about how this was obviously a much bigger deal for Pamela, and I really like that the show highlights that quite a lot. That's quite a big theme throughout. There's a scene in episode 4 which is one of the first times you really get to hear Pamela's opinion, and again, it's not Pamela's true voice, but yes, so they've just received the news that the tape is leaking. They're starting to have a bit of an argument. She's saying to Tommy, "You don't seem to understand that this is quite a big deal for me," and he's like, "What do you mean? I'm on the tape just the same as you are." She says, "But this is worse for me. I mean, this is way worse." And he's like, "How is this worse worse for you. Why? Because of your big career, so much bigger than mine. And she says, it's not because of my big career, it's because I'm a woman. She goes on to say, people are gonna think you're cool for this. They'll be high-fiving you in the street. Me, I'm gonna be looked at like a slut by the whole world, which is literally what happened. And it's true, like Tommy Lee became somewhat of a legend. Like he became known for having like this big rock star penis.
But you're like, dude, Mom, it's cool. I got the hugest dong and the whole world knows it now.
Mom, it's not a bad thing, Mom. It's cool.
Right. We actually surveyed 100 people, asking them like to name a celebrity with a huge cock, and 100% of them said Tommy.
And yeah, Pamela was slut shamed. She was made fun of. Every interview she ever went on, like it was brought up pretty much.
You're supposed to be my friend, and you're like, you know, jump on the bandwagon. Everyone's making fun of us, and
Making fun? What are you talking about? Making fun? What do you mean?
you're making fun.
I maybe told one little joke or something.
One. Tommy's been taping them.
A lot of people thought she did it on purpose. A lot of people just thought she was this disgusting, vile woman, like who would post a video of them having sex, like when it's not true at all. This was completely and utterly stolen from her. For Tommy, it was just like, oh, you know, it was kind of more easily brushed off. Obviously, it did affect both their lives and it did affect their relationship, but in the grand scheme of things, it's quite clear that it was worse for Pamela. And then as the series progresses, we start to see how it affects them. We do see that it starts to affect her career. We see her going for auditions, not getting roles. She also has a miscarriage in the series.
Regarding the miscarriage, I found conflicting information, but it seems from one interview clip from March 1996 that she did have a miscarriage during the filming of Barbed Wire, which would have been before the tape leaked according to the timeline in Pam and Tommy. But it's clear that it was still very emotionally stressful for her.
And then unfortunately, I had the miscarriage. I think that I was very ill, though, very ill. I mean, I'm pregnant now. I'm going to have the baby soon. And this pregnancy is completely different. So I think something probably was wrong from the very beginning, and that's just nature's way of, unfortunately. But that was very stressful for me because I really wanted to have a baby. And so emotionally, I was really upset after that, too. And I had endometriosis, so I had to have surgery.
In Pam and Tommy, it's made to look as though the stress of the tape being leaked could have caused the miscarriage. There's no proof that there's actually any connection, but whether it was connected or not, I think the point is that this kind of stress could very well have caused a miscarriage if she was pregnant at the time.
I can't believe I filmed the whole second half without pressing the record button. Great. But I think what's really impressive is how Pamela has dealt with this. Publicly, she dealt with it really, really well. Obviously, we don't know behind closed doors how she dealt with it, but she just took it in her stride. She owned it, and she would laugh along with the jokes. She would joke about herself, you know, and I feel like that was her way of dealing with it because it was kind of like the only way she could deal with it. There's only so much you can defend yourself and speak your truth, but still a lot of people wouldn't believe her, so she would just have to just laugh at it and make jokes. And you see this in countless interviews. This is exactly what she does. She keeps a light heart about it and she owns it. And I think a great scene that really shows this quite well is in what episode was it? Episode 7, where she's on the Jay Leno show. And this is a really interesting scene because obviously she actually did go on the Jay Leno show. In terms of the aesthetics, they made it look so similar to the original. It's actually quite scary. But regarding the subject matter of the interview, I'm not actually sure if the things spoken about in the show were the things spoken about in the actual interview because I could only find a 3-minute clip of that interview on YouTube. Couldn't find the whole thing.
So since filming this, I've seen another Jay Leno interview she did, which seems to have more connection to this scene regarding the subject matter. This is the one I showed earlier where she calls Leno out for making fun of her.
And I feel like the way that this is filmed and written, it really kind of shows how Pamela is kind of like poked and prodded at in interviews, and she kind of has to like brush it off and be like, yeah, like even though she's maybe thinking something different, she has to say what the audience wants to hear, or, you know, what is publicly acceptable. There's this great part where Tommy and 2 of her friends are in the dressing room watching, and Leno makes a sex joke. The only 2 women we see in this scene are not laughing. They're not laughing. They're not impressed with the joke. And Tommy he actually smirks and says, oh, that's actually pretty good. This is also a great depiction of like the gender divide, of like, you know, a lot of the time the men were the ones that were making the sex jokes and laughing. But anyway, the most interesting thing about this scene scene is when he asks her, what was it like to have all that exposure? This might be one of my favorite scenes just for how it was executed. They have the perspective flip, so they flip the camera angle, which was really effective. So we now see the other side of Pam and Leno's face, which are not lit up by the lights, it's like shadowed. We see the audience in the background and we get to hear what she actually wants to say. We find out a few moments later that she actually didn't say that, it was just like a flip of maybe what she wants to say in her mind, and she just tells it straight. She's like, what's it like to have a tape stolen of an intimate moment within my marriage? It's devastating. She point blank says, this is horrible, this is devastating for us.
Did you have a favorite on it?
It's not funny. It's not funny. This is devastating to us.
And then the camera flips back to reality, back to what the audience is seeing, and she's just like, oh, what? Yeah, laughs it off, which is literally what she had to do in so many interviews, just laugh it off. But I really like that in that scene it kind of showed what maybe she wanted to say. But again, it can't speak for Pamela, we don't know. She has actually said things similar to this in a 2008 interview, which is 12 years after this all happened. It's basically insinuated that this was a choice, like the sex tape was a choice.
You've made some bold choices in your life and career.
Yes.
Do you ever stop and think, wow, I wonder what the kids are going to think about this when they grow up?
You mean like the tape being stolen? Well, obviously that wasn't a choice.
No.
And then she goes on to answer the question. But I just think it's astounding that 12 years later, she's still having to correct people, make it very clear that it was stolen, it was not a choice. And the way she answers it, you can just see that she's like so done with the question. But I like the writing here. Leno says straight afterward, he says, she's one tough cookie, huh? Which is true. She is one tough cookie. And I like that they added in that line just because speaking a little bit of truth. So another scene that is really quite heavy, where Pamela is actually speaking up for herself and speaking the truth about the situation, is in episode 7. So this is where her lawyer has just told her that the judge has ruled in favor of Penthouse, basically meaning that they've granted them the right to release pictures of her naked body from the tape under the law of free speech or something like that. And he's like, I don't get it. I don't get why they've just brushed it off as free speech. And she's like, I do. They have to say something. They can't say the actual reason that I don't have any rights because I have spent my public life in a bathing suit, because I have the nerve to pose for Playboy. They can't actually say that sluts don't get to decide what happens to pictures of their body, that I don't get to decide what happens to my actual body. So they say something else instead. The lawyer then says, Pam, I understand your position. Pam snapped back with, you will never understand my position. The camera always zooms in on like these big powerful lines, gives it a lot of weight and effect. She then goes on to say, this is why I should never have taken your advice. I knew this was going to lead us here. That is essentially what happened. The judge deemed the tape and any images from the tape as public property. The court decided that it wasn't private property because her body belongs to the world, you know. She's been in Playboy and spent, you know, all her time with hardly any clothes on. So, like, what's the difference? This intimate video, which is, oh, it's so crazy. I can't believe this happened to her. I feel so awful. Like, I cannot believe this happened. If this happened now, it would be so different. And this is another reason why I do think that it's kind of a good thing that this show came out, because it's really saying something. Like, it's really saying that this should not have happened. This was so wrong. And there's this great character called Gail. She was played by Mazan Mano, and she plays Pamela's, I think she's the publicist for her new film Barbed Wire, or some kind of like PR manager, and she kind of acts as Pamela's confidant throughout the series, and she's such a great character. She's kind of like this very bold, powerful woman. She knows what she's doing. She doesn't let any man tell her what to do. She's just like confident, beautiful, she wears all these great 90s power suits. She's just a great character. She has some great lines. She gives Pamela advice, and basically there's this scene in episode 5 5 where they're in the trailer, and this is after Gail has just told her that she shouldn't have taken the lawyer's advice. The lawyers advised Pamela to sue Penthouse just in case they share the photos from the tape, and Pamela was like, I don't think we should sue, because if we sue then they're probably gonna do this out of spite anyway. But they convinced her to sue anyway, and so she did, and then exactly what she thought would happen happened. So this is right after Gail has told her you shouldn't have taken the lawyer's advice. Pam then says, well, you try saying no to a room full of men. And Gail says, honey, I do it all day long. And then Pam's like, well, yeah, well, I guess it's just easier for some women. And Gail, and I love this line, Gail says, no, it is not easy for any woman. We are programmed from birth to say yes to men, but it's a skill you gotta learn. I love that line. After that line, I was like, damn, Gail, you're right. If I was in a room full of lawyers, like male lawyers, I would probably take their advice too, because it's like we are programmed like men know best, and you know, men are trustworthy and they're all in the higher up positions, and you know, all these lawyers in suits, and like if a room of lawyers in suits was telling me to do something, I'd probably agree. I really felt for Pamela. There's this other great scene which I personally found very satisfying. So this is in episode 7, towards the end of the series. Another scene where we hear another female voice speaking up for Pamela and defending Pamela. So this is when Rand has just told his ex-wife Erica that he was the one that stole the tape and distributed it. And she's speechless and she loses her shit. She gets really angry. And he's like, I don't understand why you're so angry. It's just porn. And she's like, it is not porn, you asshole. And she just says this with such gusto and such meaning behind the words. I really like how she delivered this whole scene, because it really is showing what a lot of us just want to say. Like, her character just says it like exactly how we're feeling it. Just this explosive anger of, what the fuck, you know? And he's like, yes, it is porn. She's like, no. When people are having sex on camera, they sign releases. They are giving consent. Did Pamandtommy sign a release form? Did Tommy Lee sign a fucking release form? She says, and then she proceeds to kick him out of her apartment. And I was just, after that scene, I was like, go Erica, like, say it how it is, the damn truth. So one of the most difficult scenes to watch was in episode 6, and it's where she's getting interrogated by these lawyers in a deposition, I think it's called. I don't know lawyer talk. They're having to film, like, asking her these questions. They're basically on the side of Penthouse. They're trying to find reasons to make it okay to share these images and make it okay that this sex tape is out there. And they're asking her all these horrible questions and really personal questions, and it's a really hard one to watch. They only asked Pamela to be in the interview and not Tommy, which like shows how they're singling her out to make her more vulnerable, because they know that she might not like be able to stand up for herself. So they only interviewed Pamela and not Tommy. Like, how crazy is that? Like, they're both involved in this. Why are they just like, yeah, it's crazy. And anyway, so not sure if the actual real like court interview of like the legal interview is out publicly. I haven't even really looked for it, to be honest. So I don't know if the questions asked in this scene are what were really asked, but I imagine they was probably pretty similar. They also make her watch her own sex tape, and they like make her explain what is happening scene by scene in a room full of lawyers. Like, how painful is that? And again, I'm not entirely sure if that actually happened, but I'm assuming that it did. I didn't look into that side of it. But anyway, so he asked, was that exciting to you and your husband? She's feeling like really uncomfortable and dizzy, and she goes to the bathroom, she throws up in the toilet, and the only other female in the scene, in the whole room, is the only one that shows any sympathy and goes to check on her. And she finds her in the bathroom, and she has this one line, and she says, for what it's worth, I've seen a lot of horrible depositions, but this, and that says it all. It's interesting how these female characters are the only ones showing any sympathy for her. After watching the entire show, it was quite clear that this having happened to them was one of the major reasons that their relationship didn't work out. We see the amount of stress and strain it put on them as a couple, and I think the show kind of displays that as one of the reasons that they didn't work out. They did get back together in 2008 briefly. It didn't last. At the very end of the show, it comes up with you know, a few words about what actually happened afterwards. Although yes, the tape did play a big part in possibly the demise of their relationship, would they still be together if it hadn't have happened? I don't know. Obviously there was also some violence, you know, Tommy was violent towards her, which was the straw that broke the camel's back. She had a divorce straight away after that happened, which good on her. No one should ever have to go through that or put up with that or make excuses for that. But would he have been violent in the first place to her if this had not happened? Who knows? I know that they're both quite happy in their personal lives now. I know that Pamela's just gone through a breakup, unfortunately. That's a whole nother story. I only just found that out a couple days ago. I thought she was still with her current husband. They seemed really happy together. I was so happy for her. She was living a very private life up in Canada in a nice big house, and sadly that's now ended too. Gosh, this girl does have it hard sometimes. So would they still be together if this didn't happen? In my opinion, no, I don't think so. I think they're both very different people. I think that for one reason or another it would have ended, but who's to know? Maybe I'm wrong, you know, you might have a different opinion. At the end of the day, we don't know them. We don't know the intricacies of their relationship, the layers, the complexities, and so it is not ever anyone's job or right to assume or say what another person's relationship is or should be. So that was kind of the heavy stuff. Obviously there's a lot more to be said, but there's only so much I can fit into one video. But I wanted to also keep this upbeat, and so in part 2 I'm going to be just talking a little bit more, you know, positively about the show and the things I liked about it, talking more about the aesthetics. I know these are kind of more shallow things. That's why I wanted to make this video first, to talk about the seriousness and the controversy, but I also wanted to appreciate all the effort and the work that went into the show, because whether it was right or wrong to make this show, the creative team were phenomenal. So we're going to be talking all about that in part 2, so you can find that right here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you over in part 2.